When you think of urbanism, what comes to mind? Walkability and well-connected streets? Dense mixed-use and transit-oriented development? Abundant public spaces like plazas, parks, and greenways? What about safe and accessible bike infrastructure? I'd say all of the above is correct. While American cities, by and large, aren't nearly on the same level of urbanism as most of our European counterparts, I do think there are some places in this country that exemplify a distinctly unique American urbanism. Big cities like Portland, Boston, Chicago, DC, and of course New York City are all atop the urbanism food chain in the US. Today, though, we'll be looking at what urbanism looks like within the least populous and second least dense state in the entire country, the great state of Wyoming. Specifically, the cities of Cheyenne and Laramie. Cheyenne, the state's largest city and its capital, only has about 65,000 residents, and Laramie about half of that. In any other state, these cities would be nothing but a relatively small to mid-sized suburb, especially in my state of California. But here, Cheyenne is the big city. What does urbanism even look like in a place like this? Both Laramie and Cheyenne were founded by the Union Pacific Railroad, making them some of America's first company towns, founded on passenger rail. We'll be diving into the history, built environment, urban fabric, people, and car-centric infrastructure, and everything else I found in my time exploring urban southern Wyoming. If you're new to the channel, this is Fourth Place, your place to learn about US geography, urbanism, transportation, and city planning. Laramie and Cheyenne are both located along Interstate 80 in the southern portion of the state. And as I was traveling from Salt Lake City to Denver by car, this was my go-to route. My first stop was obvious. I thought to myself, if I was going to find any urbanism or smart urban planning in Wyoming, it was probably going to be in their college town, Laramie, home to the state's only four-year public university, the University of Wyoming. College towns are usually a hotspot for smart urban planning and urbanism, especially in and around big-name schools with a lot of money and a lot of students. If you think about it, universities kind of operate as a sort of micro-city, where people live, work, shop, eat, visit, and participate in recreation. College towns and college campuses almost have to excel in urbanism and put pedestrians over cars, because the reality is most people are getting around on foot or by bike or scooter, and that's encouraged. People are walking and biking to class, to go get food, to go to the gym, their dorms, and the surrounding college town would be wise to make walking and cycling as safe and easy as possible. Larger college towns tend to make the most of land use, because they're such a hotspot for pedestrians and cyclists coming from campus. This usually means that downtown college town commercial investments are safer due to the indefinite nature of university student demand, which in turn incentivizes density and as much commercial and retail space as possible. Think Cambridge, Massachusetts, home of MIT and Harvard, or Tempe, Arizona, home of Arizona State University, both successful, well-known urbanized college towns. What I discovered in Laramie, though, is that the dynamic here is a bit different. Laramie is, no doubt, a college town. The university is by far the largest employer and the most dominant economic force in the city, with a whopping 34% of the town working for it. That's kinda crazy, and honestly just goes to show how small of a college town this is. In fact, it's uniquely small. Unlike famous college towns such as Ann Arbor, Michigan, or Athens, Georgia, home to the University of Michigan and University of Georgia respectively, Laramie's downtown is not directly connected to the university. See, college town urbanism works best when the established downtown is literally across the street from the college. As that's not the case here, the downtown, where you'd usually see a lot of life, density, and urbanism, is entirely missing due to that separation, however small, from campus. There's about a dozen or so strictly residential blocks of separation, meaning connecting the two in meaningful ways just hasn't happened yet. Unfortunate for sure, but how about life on campus? Well, to say that bike culture here is thriving would be an understatement. Even on a Monday at 3 p.m., there were bikes and bike riders everywhere, on every corner, and in front of every academic building. I feel like this is actually above average campus bike ridership, which I was definitely surprised to see at this university. I found an abundance of dedicated bike paths on campus and plenty of bike parking too. It's clear that students feel comfortable on their bikes, which was surprising given just how car-centric everything off campus is. We'll get to that in a sec. It's also great to see that the university is turning surface parking lots into student housing, as apparently, demand has outpaced supply in recent years, leading to some students struggling to find any place for short-term living in Laramie. I only wish this massive undertaking featured more mixed-use development, as I think students need as many on-campus resources as possible, given just how car-centric the rest of the city is. Uniquely, students want to walk and bike to fulfill their needs. The university has a real opportunity to urbanize, and I think they're sitting on a gold mine of potential. Just imagine the possibilities if they tempered and redeveloped most of this on-campus parking for more people-centric uses. Maybe they wouldn't be struggling to retain enrollment numbers year after year. The benefits would be endless. So outside of the parking lot-filled sports complex that makes up about 75% of the land area of campus, pedestrians actually have it pretty good, particularly in the old campus area, centered by Prexy's Pasture, a campus quad on par with the best universities in the country, in my opinion. The pasture features a ton of walkways, making it easy for students and faculty to get where they need to go with relative ease. Overall, Old Campus is really quite beautiful, full of these picturesque Romanesque revival buildings encircling the pasture and really providing a nice, comfortable, enclosed border and setting for the university. So while pedestrian and cycling infrastructure on campus is fairly good, walking and cycling to get around town is sort of a fool's errand. In Laramie, the main road running east-west through town, connecting the downtown and the university, is the Old Lincoln Highway, one of America's first transcontinental highways designed expressly for automobiles. And here, cars are going fast, like 40 to 50 miles per hour in a 30 zone, in the university area. There should be no reason for cars to have to go that fast, especially in this pedestrian-heavy zone. Especially when you have street crossings that look like this. The truncated domes here are a joke, because, nobody should be crossing here, especially not the blind of all people. The stoplights here are few and far between, and I saw plenty of students making a mad dash to get to the opposite side of the road, and it was just kinda sad altogether. There's a serious lack of hybrid beacons, or even rapid flashing beacons, and it's just dangerous in its current iteration. The city has to recognize how many people are walking, biking, and scootering in this area, and should change the street infrastructure to suit that. Even the adjacent streets aren't the best option, and I only felt comfortable walking the strictly residential University Ave to get from campus into downtown. And now about that downtown. It was fairly quiet on a Monday evening, as expected, I guess. There's about a dozen or so bars that I'm sure are pretty full during game days, when the team's any good, that is. A lot of cool Victorian, Romanesque revival and craftsman buildings that were built in the years of the city's founding, predating the founding of the state entirely. See, in the 1860s, the Union Pacific Railroad essentially created the cities of Laramie and Cheyenne as service hubs, complete with hotels, dining halls for passengers and construction crews, as well as repair shops and housing. Its contemporary form, though, is quaint, with small businesses dotted all along the main streets of Grand Ave and 2nd Street. It's an easy walk, with a lot of street art and bike docks for those students who do wish to travel here on bike. I just wish it was safer for them. Overall, I had a great time walking around and exploring downtown Laramie. It's like a time capsule in a way. The Laramie tourism site actually has a whole page dedicated to explaining the history of each of their historic buildings within downtown in bite-sized descriptions. Very, very cool stuff indeed. I also found this little gem taped to the window of a local storefront. Wyoming hasn't had any passenger rail service since Amtrak suspended its Pioneer and San Francisco Zephyr lines in the 80s and 90s. The next day, I spent the morning in Cheyenne, about 50 miles east on I-80. Cheyenne's downtown was shockingly beautiful. Although the two cities were founded within a year of each other, you'll notice that the buildings in Cheyenne are just on another level compared to Laramie. They're bigger, bolder, more colorful, highly dignified, and incredibly detailed. In my opinion, these are works of art. These old railroad buildings were built to attract people's attention, to attract settlement in what was known as Cheyenne City, and it absolutely worked. The city's population exploded in the years following the Union Pacific founding it as its Mountain West headquarters. Its train depot was said to have been the grandest west of the Mississippi, and that definitely still holds up today. Now, though, it's a museum cataloging the storied history of the relationship between the railroad and the city of Cheyenne, and the state of Wyoming broadly. Outside the museum, plaques explaining the various stories and history of many points of interest can be read all throughout downtown, including that of Cheyenne's street railroad that ran from 1887 to 1924. It's hardly urban in any way, shape, or form, but if you step into the more traditional residential infrastructure surrounding downtown, you'll get the sense that once upon a time, this was a city that was walkable, transit-oriented, and actually full of that traditional urbanism that was so popular in streetcar cities. Nowadays, that infrastructure has been retrofitted for cars in many ways, but to think it could have been built up instead of out is a shame. Honestly though, with how short-lived the railroad boom was in this part of the state, it never got the chance to. It's abundantly clear that in recent years, the city has prioritized outward growth instead of upward growth. There's no question that Cheyenne's suburbs are expanding. And in the short term, I kinda get it. There's just not a whole lot of incentive for density in a state that's the second least dense in the US. But honestly, with Cheyenne's natural beauty, coupled with its extremely low taxes relative to the rest of the country, I could see this city growing a lot in the coming decades, maybe even one day becoming something like a Denver. Geographically, it's nearly identical to the Mile High City, only about 100 miles north along the Rocky Mountain chain. I would just hate to see Cheyenne go the way of other abandoned rail cities in the American West. Being the state's capital definitely helps. Hopefully, the Wyoming government has it in them to draw more people to their biggest city and really put it on the map. It's an interesting case of a city being both the capital and most populous in the state, while at the same time, if you ask the average American where this place was, they probably couldn't tell you. But it's clear that it's not as prosperous as it once was. A story as old as American history. Economically speaking, it has a somewhat sizable military industry, with Francis E. Warren Air Force Base within its city limits, but outside of that, it's far from a sustainable economic powerhouse. Very far. It struggles to bring in even a few hundred new residents in a calendar year, and I do think there is this sense throughout the state that the people here have no wish to see it grow, urbanize, develop, or anything of the sort, which is definitely a shame. Cities that fail to adapt, especially in the 21st century, are ill-fated in the long run. I do think if there was just that push from the government, the state would experience a rebirth and renaissance, similar to what states like Tennessee, Utah, South Carolina, and Idaho are experiencing today. There's so much hidden potential here, but for now, we'll just have to wait and see what Wyoming's identity will be going forward. Will it continue with the status quo? Will it continue to fight growth and urbanization year after year? Or will it slowly begin to make people and sustainable development a priority? I guess we'll find out sooner or later. Thanks for watching, click that like button if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next week from 4th place.